Neighbor. My name is Lynn Corum. I'm your host today. And today our guest is Art Greenbaum. And this is our second show. We hope you saw our first one. So we're going to continue our conversation. So Art, again, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Lynn, for having me. It's really enjoyable to be here.
Yeah. We talked a lot on the first show about the ramifications of business, how they grow, how you either grow smart or you'd probably die and
That's a good way to put
work for somebody else.
Right.
And that there's a business person really has a lot of responsibilities of payroll and organizing the systems that make everything work. And that's, I think, underappreciated sometimes in our, everybody thinks, oh, it's easy to be the boss.
Absolutely. I know it's easy to be the boss because I have Susan at home and she's the boss and she does everything.
Now that's not what I meant.
Oh.
Oh. But let's talk about we talked about all the pressures on business, and one of the big things for this particular area that's really going to be interesting, and be interesting how we handle it, is if Vermont Yankee does close, which does seem to be on that path. If the legislature seems to be bound and determined to make that happen, what will that mean to business in our area?
Well, the big concern that I have for business in our area is actually the big businesses that have electrical generation needs are going to find it extremely difficult to cough up the extra money.
You think they're that tight?
I believe every big business is that tight. When you look at facilities that are making, let's say, stainless steel parts, think of the energy costs there. If you think of a lumber company sawing out lumber and then drying it, think of the costs there. On the flip side of that, I can't imagine what the electrical bill is at our BMH every day. And our schools. Now, I have about a monthly average of about $450 for electric at the GPI campus. This powers up our office and our storage facilities.
$450
a month. Imagine if that's my bill and it goes up by 30%.
Which is what they're forecasting.
I believe it's a very accurate forecast. If that's the case, can you imagine what that's going to do to the reimbursable rate for BMH and the hospitals and what their electrical bill must be on a daily basis or an annual?
And I understand all the hospitals, unfortunately, in the state are in the red right now as we speak. So if you're already operating in the red and then you get hit with another.
Yeah. I think, I think your comment about the hospitals in the red are part of the economic sign of the times.
True.
Everybody,
but it's a reality.
It's a reality. Everybody has been feeling this recession, and I personally think it's not a recession. I think it's really the depression. It's politics that don't want to talk about it. If you wanted to look at percentages and statistics, just go on Google and look up the depression and how many people lost their jobs, how many people were on food lines, how many people lost their homes. And all it is just a couple more decimal points, but the percentages are still the same. And it's going on for as long as we've had. The key, with the power is the fact that increased cost to power is going to impact everybody. And the big nuts are going to be the schools, the hospitals, the lumber companies, the machine tool industry.
But all those things have to pass their costs along, or eat it, or go out of business.
Or go somewhere else. There are other locations where power may become more favorable looking. And if Vermont has had one of the lowest power rates
In New England, we do.
And we do. Yeah. That means somebody's number 2 and somebody is also number 3. So if there are 5 locations in New England that they look at the power rates. Maybe one of those are going to become number one, and we're going to see some of our bigger employers decide to move 150 miles away from here where they can get cheaper power, or maybe even out of the area, down south or out of the country.
Yankee is a big piece of the grid. It's not huge. I mean, I guess it's somebody would say 2% of New England's grid.
I'm not sure of that.
I know that there's a number thrown around by people. But still, locally, it might not be, you might not just be able to move your business across the river, which a lot of people have done and are doing.
Right.
Because New Hampshire would rely on, probably be influenced by Yankees rate too. So I think your suggestion that you go down south or out of the country, but then if you go down south, those jobs move out of the state. And so there would be a population problem or decline.
Well, I think there's a
works.
population decline already happening. This past week in a White River, Hanover newspaper, they had a feature story on the census. And if you look at Chittenden County, it grew. If you look at Addison County, it grew. If you look at Windham County, it barely grew. If you go up to Windsor County, they saw a decline. If you look at the border communities of New Hampshire, you know, the Keene area, the White River Junction, which would be Hanover, they all grew by 4 or 5%. So there's that population shift already, because that's where the jobs are, because of whether it's more favorable, there could be better housing, but people are looking at that. So whether it's on a local level, that with increased costs, jobs move to just the other side of the river, or on a national level, they look at the cost for power, and they move from Vermont, exit one industrial park, to another part of the country.
Yeah.
It can happen.
Well,
and it does happen.
And we see it happen with Green Mountain Coffee, for example. You know, everybody loves Green Mountain Coffee. They have their facility. They really can't move out of the Green Mountain State, or they change the name, but they probably could anyway. People don't know. When you go to buy coffee, you don't say, "This is made in Vermont." You know, it's not. But they have an operation in Tennessee. And they told Governor Douglas, because he was on this show and he told me that, they have told him flat out, when they go to expand, they will not be expanding in Vermont. They'll put their energy and money into the Tennessee plant. More favorable tax structure, work structure, you know, energy costs, all that stuff.
Yeah. Well, population based on the census has proven that there is a migration of people moving out of the colder weather, going towards the south, going towards the central part of the country, because that's where the jobs are. It has a lot to do with housing, the job market, companies move because of power costs. But I think it's important for us, if we're going to stay viable as a region, and I mean both Vermont, New Hampshire, and the New England region, we have to keep our power costs competitive, and we have to provide replacement. And of course, I don't know the specifics of Hydro-Quebec and the exact dollars that we're going to pay, but I think everybody's starting to get pretty smart, and they're saying, well, how come we're not getting another 20-year commitment for more power from Hydro-Quebec?
Because they've given us 1 year.
And is that because they want to see what their competition is? And if there is
You're
competition,
you're a businessman. What would a businessman think?
well, I would think that if I had no competition, I'd bump my price a little bit
Yeah.
and put a little more money back in my pocket.
You think that's what they're thinking?
I would say that they're smart businessmen, and that's what they're thinking.
Yeah. Well, and this whole thing is I personally, I won't put you in this camp, I believe that the closing of Yankee is all politics. After this Japanese situation, I mean, the plant over there survived the earthquake. It was a tsunami that knocking out the power that caused the problem, so they couldn't keep things cool. I don't know if we're going to get a tsunami coming up the Connecticut River, but from the ocean. I don't, I'm sure somebody thinks, oh, that will happen, but I think the chances are small.
Yeah.
So I think it's appeasement in the politics, and it's most unfortunate because it's going to hurt. This is going to hurt.
Yeah. Well, going back to what you say about Vermont Yankee and the tsunami effect. Number one, I have publicly stated that I am in favor of the relicensing. I believe in a balanced portfolio of power. I've said that to the Public Service Commission. You can't put all your eggs in one basket. And I think it's great that we are developing solar. I'd like to see more of it. I was really proud that GPI built the Green Mountain Power retrofit of an old metal building where they have their trucks at now, and they put many solar collectors there. I've also been driving to Bennington recently, and every day I see all those wind turbines except one, which is still not turning for some reason, and they're turning, okay? But you need a balance of power in your portfolio. You do need some biomass, but now our foresters are starting to say,
how many trees can we cut down?
Before we run out, right? Because everybody is now thinking, and I commend the governor for saying, we should look at pellets as an alternative to oil. Now, in 1975, I started the business. In 1978, we turned around and put a wood furnace in conjunction with our house. So we have an oil furnace and a wood furnace. And with that, since 1978, yes, we've been burning wood at our house in Hillwoods. I'd like to switch to pellets because, you know what? It's easier. I can load it for every 2 days instead of every 2 hours. And I think all of those things are important. But we can't just pull the plug on our power plant. We have to start really thinking ahead. And all of the things that have surfaced in the last 2 years, especially, you said it, the nuclear issue is a political issue. The scientific aspect of it, I think, is pretty cut and dry. If we can keep politics focused on getting the next storage facility, getting the next wind turbine up, get all of these things done, then you're going to be in place, whether it's 2012 or 2032 or 2022, to replace what we have. But you can't just pull the plug on it today because we're not prepared.
I know there's been nothing but lip service done to preparation and planning. And you talk about wind and solar. I was out in Iowa, and in the northern part of the state, there's quite a wind tunnel effect through there. And so they have a lot of windmills. I think they have about 5,000 or more. I can't say how many, but they have a lot. They get 5% of their power in the state from that, and they want to bump it up, and people are saying, oh my gosh, how many more is it going to take?
Right.
And if you notice, when they show an advertisement for wind, they only show you one tower. I'm sure you've driven down the San Joaquin Valley, I think it is,
right,
in California. My impression of it is it looks like a cemetery. Because there's just it's like going to Arlington. There's row after row after row for miles of these windmills.
Right.
Now you sort of go down and say, well, you wouldn't want a house here anyway because it's just so arid.
Right.
But we're not a state that's good for wind. We're certainly not a state that's good for sun. And we don't have, the topography is going to make it very difficult. So, and plus they're very expensive power.
Right. Well,
so then we go back to your portfolio.
Right. You have to have a balance of portfolio of power. I don't disagree with the fact that Vermont Yankee will close. You want to know something? Someday I'm going to die. It will happen. But when? That's what I disagree with. I know tomorrow at 4 p.m. I'm working on a volunteer committee with the BDCC talking about life after the Vermont Yankee. What can we do for our economics situation in town? The site at Vermont Yankee has all the infrastructure to support other generations of power.
We got the lines and all that.
We got the lines. We have a lot of things there. I can remember about 25 years ago, there was talk of about a natural gas spur coming right through to Brattleboro. They wanted.
Governor Cunin tried to run it down the interstate, didn't she?
I believe it was during her administration.
Yeah.
They wanted to put a power plant at the Pownell racetrack. They wanted to put a power plant, I believe, in Rutland, where they had a trash incinerator that was going to be converted to power. And all of those things stopped dead in the tracks. So the natural gas spur came through the northeast kingdom and then drops down into upper New Hampshire and eventually fed the seacoast of New Hampshire. We could have been part of that spur. If we had been part of that spur, probably the economics of natural gas and building a gas-fired power plant would have forced Vermont Yankee to close as scheduled by the permit. But when you don't have the replacement, it's not going to happen too easily.
Look at the resistance to that spur idea.
Oh, that spur was fighted with the NIMBY syndrome, which is not in my backyard, as a political hot potato, just like the wind generators are a hot potato. Nobody wants a wind generator on their hill.
Yeah, and no, evidently no source is more opposed than these wind solar generators, because I think they take up so much space. They influence so many people. The footprint has to be huge.
I think that if you look at generation of power, when you compare solar, wind, and nuclear, there's still a footprint that is impacted, whether it's part of the emergency planning zone that is impacted, or whether it's because you hear the noise of the wind turbines that are impacted. You know, if we want the convenience of power, we are going to be impacted.
And I think that's part of the argument that doesn't, or the conversation that doesn't be held, is what choices do we want to make? And when we make this choice, what's it going to look like? And the risk assessment that goes with all those choices. And that's where we have to be adults.
Absolutely. Yep.
And sometimes I think that's a little lacking
Right.
side. So from a businessman point of view, it sounds like this could really tighten the belt and make us suffer competitively.
I believe that, without cost-effective power that our bigger industries can tap into, it will definitely impact us. And that's going to be a trickle-down effect. If a big business leaves, there'll be less jobs. If there's less jobs, it's harder for people to make the mortgage payments, so they move to where there is a job. They, in return, elect to sell their house in a lower rate, so the housing prices spiral. It's a spiral effect. It takes a lot to stop it from going down. It takes a lot to get it to go up. Years ago, somebody said, well, it's like a pendulum. You can push the pendulum one way, and then it'll only go so far, and then it's going to come back hard the other way, and you got to try to always balance that pendulum so you can plan for your future. You'd like to be able to plan for retirement, know that your hospital is going to still be in business and not forced out of business because of power, and know that you can still afford your home because we have businesses here that are paying the taxes, and know that
providing jobs.
Yeah. So, you want to plan for your own future, and power is really a critical component because it impacts the food that we'll have at the supermarket. If it costs more power to run the compressors for all that nice fresh produce, it's going to cost more to live.
Yeah, and we have people who will say, well, we could just all walk, or we should all just grow, have our own gardens. And that might work for some people. But other people, you just don't have the space to do it, or you're working full-time if you have a job. And so it's sort of a little unrealistic thinking that it's all going to shift back to the 1900s.
I think
how we live.
I think it's very unreasonable to think that way. An example that I would use, as I mentioned earlier, I've been burning wood as my primary fuel source since about 1978. But I was also very fortunate. I had a business partner who happened to also work out of the house, so she could afford the every 2 hours to go down and feed the wood furnace. If she was working off-site, not at home, she couldn't feed a wood furnace, so I'd have to rely on oil. Well, everybody has to have a balance, and not everybody is going to want to raise their own chickens in their backyard. I raised chickens, and 2 days later the fox got it, so I got out of the chicken business. But I did raise pigs, and they were good. But then I lost my source of free food to feed those pigs, so after a while I got out of the pig business too. But it was fun.
Yeah, and to think that we can all go back to the 1990s, which is, some of the suggestions of how we'd have to organize things, it would be. Another pressure we're feeling, I'm sure business is feeling, is this new healthcare law that the House has passed, which they've done what I think the single payer advocates have always wanted. You're in favor of a single payer type
Absolutely.
system. The big problem that I think all of them have never squared the corner on is how's it going to be paid for? And this bill doesn't address that either. But what are your thoughts on some of that?
Well, let me start off by saying I am in favor of a single payer healthcare system. Healthcare is something that everybody should be able to participate in. At what level of healthcare you participate in should also be considered based on your contributions. It can't be just uniformly right across the board that everybody gets the best of everything, because we can't afford that.
Well,
it's not in the mix.
I know, but that's, I think, what the single payer advocates, that's how they see it coming out.
I think the single payer advocates are going to have the realization that we're all in it together, so you have to compromise. And what I mean by that is, I look at single payer healthcare similar to, let's say, Medicare. We know that Medicare doesn't give you everything at the age of 66 or 65. If you want to buy the best possible health care, you will buy supplemental insurance or Medigap to help take care of the needs that you feel could come up in your future. So we do have a single payer healthcare system in place. It's known as Medicare.
You're true.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
We do have programs that have been accepted by people to say this is the level of service I get with Medicare. So I think I will put a little money away as I'm growing older to buy a little bit more insurance so that I can have Medicare plus some supplemental stuff to take care of. Okay? So that's taking responsibility for yourself, but it's still a single payer system. And then the last component of it is everybody has to put in a portion. Now what I mean by this is, if you worked your entire 45, 50-year career for cash off the books and the government didn't catch you, you're not going to get Medicare because you don't even have a record. On the same token, if you are not paying anything towards your medical insurance, it's not fair. So you need to have a single payer program that requires both the young, healthy 23-year-old construction worker who doesn't want to participate in Catamount, because let's face it, I'm healthy and I'd rather have my money for my car payment.
Yeah.
And you need that young 23-year-old and the moderately middle-aged 40-year-old construction worker who's now starting to think of, gee, I got tennis elbow here or carpal tunnel developing, I better have some health insurance, but I'll get it next year when I'm 50. And then you also have the folks that are now starting to say, boy, I got another ache and pain and I need that insurance. Insurance doesn't cover and pay unless we all participate. So what I look at is I say the following. If you have car insurance, which we're required to have, that covers your liability. If you want collision and comprehensive insurance, you pay extra for that. Well, that's the same thing, the analogy for Medicare and Medigap. At the same time, no one should be allowed to just have it carte blanche free of charge. They should be required, and I know some states actually have a tax that they impose where if you don't have medical insurance, you are, when you have your state income tax return filled out, you're automatically penalized another $900 per individual.
That's Massachusetts, isn't it?
I believe so. I don't want to be quoted on that because I don't like to say something that I'm not 100% sure of, but I think I'm 99%
They
sure
have a
on that.
penalty, I think.
Yeah, they have a penalty, and that's fair.
Yeah, the problem with this health care bill that our state is looking at is there's an equity belief that is a component of this, that everybody should have equal access and equal access to the same thing, where the system you just described, if you want to pay for, you have a minimum that's allowable, and if you want more, you have to pay for more.
Right.
Which is the way the Medicare system is set up. But they don't. That's not the way this health care bill will be coming down at this point. And it will be loaded, it's pretty much paid for on the payroll tax. So if you have a person who has a trust fund, or is retired, or maybe doesn't work, like I don't work, I won't pay anything towards it, and yet I'll get health care.
I haven't seen
That's it.
the finer points of it,
Mhm.
and I can't really comment on it. I do know that there are people that are devoting a lot of energy and effort towards it, and I just hope that whether you're a pro single payer, carte blanche, give them everything, or you're of the belief that I'm at, where I'm a single payer, and I believe we should have a fair amount of health coverage for everyone. I think that, the people that are working to pull that package together will hopefully take us all into consideration, because we're all in it together.
Yeah, we are, and I think the way the House bill reads right now, I've read it, is it's got several parts that are disturbing. One is that there's going to be a board in charge of deciding what they'll pay for and what's covered, and that board also will decide if they have to raise our income taxes, they will. If they have to raise the assessment fees on the hospitals, the equipment we use, they will. And so the legislature has given those responsibilities that we elected them to do to a board. And so I think that's a little problematic. I mean, we're going to see some interesting results come out of that process.
I think you're going to see a lot of interesting results. You have to keep in mind that your hospital care is also ruled by, I believe, a board, so that BMH just can't charge what they want. They have to prove to it. When you look at a board saying how much they want to reimburse a doctor for services, I think there are a lot of doctors and medical facilities that would prefer to practice medicine than to try to practice the business of a roulette wheel. And that's about what it is when you try to figure out what you're going to be reimbursed with.
On that note, I want to thank you, Art, for talking with us today.
It's been my pleasure.
Yeah, it's been a great conversation. And we thank you for watching. You've been watching Neighbor to Neighbor. My name is Lynn Coram. I've been here with Art Greenbaum, and we hope to see you on our next show.